It didn't begin with a gunshot, a military standoff, or even the thunderous bark of Dew, the world's least disciplined golden retriever. No, the whole mess started with a spicy chicken sandwich. Extra pickles. Dropped squarely into the lap of a man named Hank Mercer at precisely 8:42 a.m. Hank, a retired Navy Seabee turned landscape contractor and full-time trouble magnate, barely had time to wipe buffalo sauce from his beard when trouble arrived in the form of Bonnie Calloway, a woman armed with a laminated badge, a clipboard, and a delusional belief that she had the same authority as federal agents. Blocking the only entrance to Briar Glen Estates in her electric golf cart, ominously named Liberty, Bonnie had appointed herself the neighborhood's first and only enforcer of all things HOA. Her ride sported flashing orange lights and a bumper sticker that read, "My other vehicle enforces the Constitution." "You can't enter this neighborhood without proper authorization," she said, tapping her clipboard with the same authority as a DMV clerk on a power trip. Hank leaned out the window of his absurdly oversized camo-wrapped pickup truck, sandwich in one hand, coffee in the other. "Bonnie, we've been over this. I've got a signed landscaping contract for Lot 22. Federal stamp and everything." Bonnie clicked her pen like she was about to issue a subpoena. "Briar Glen has its own regulations. Landscaping deliveries must be approved by the board and scheduled through proper HOA channels." "I don't speak HOA," Hank replied, chewing. "I speak diesel, contracts, and common sense." I pulled up behind him in my mom's old sedan, iced coffee in hand, watching from the driver's seat like I'd scored front row seats to a live-action sitcom. Even before things exploded, I knew nothing about this was going to end with mulch quietly delivered. From the passenger seat of Hank's truck, Duke let loose a barking fit that could rattle windows, drawing a startled flinch from Bonnie. "I'll be issuing a citation," she said, clutching her clipboard like a lifeline. Hank raised an eyebrow. "You make that on Canva? Glitter paper and all?" "It's legally binding in this community," Bonnie snapped. "Oh good," Hank muttered, folding the citation into a paper airplane and launching it at her feet. "I'll see you in kangaroo court." That's when the rumble started. Not thunder. Not a tremor. The unmistakable growl of diesel engines in formation. 6 Humvees, 2 armored personnel carriers, and a command truck rounded the corner in what looked like the most coordinated military convoy Briar Glen had ever seen, maybe the most action since the great mailbox vandalism incident of 2019. From the lead Humvee stepped Colonel Raymond Archer, a man with a jawline like a cinder block and the emotional range of 1-2. He looked like someone who ironed his uniforms with rage and shaved with tactical razors. He stopped short at the sight of Liberty blocking the entrance. "What in God's name is this?" he asked. Bonnie adjusted her aviator sunglasses. "This is a private neighborhood and I am enforcing the HOA guidelines regarding unscheduled landscaping." Colonel Archer narrowed his eyes. "Ma'am, you are obstructing a vehicle operating under a federal contract." Bonnie did not flinch. "Your truck is in violation of Section 14.2 Vehicular Disruption of Community Aesthetic Harmony." "That's code for she doesn't like my eagle decals," Hank called out. Colonel Archer stepped forward, hands behind his back. "Step aside or I will be forced to report this to the Department of Defense as obstruction of a federal training operation. That includes impersonating law enforcement." "I'm the elected HOA president," Bonnie sniffed. "This is within my authority." "Then maybe your board would like to explain to the Pentagon why a military simulation was delayed by a woman in a golf cart and a novelty badge," Archer replied. Bonnie's jaw opened and closed like a fish trying to recite the Bill of Rights. Then came Sergeant Clint Dorsey, clipboard in hand, stepping out of the second Humvee like a man who had survived 5 deployments and every flavor of MRE. "This the lady?" he asked. Archer gave the slightest nod. "Well, hell," Dorsey said. "I figured she'd be taller." Bonnie, already fumbling with her phone to call someone at City Council, hissed, "This is an abuse of power." "So is writing citations with cat stickers," Archer said flatly. Then the command truck's rear doors opened. 2 soldiers stepped out carrying a crate labeled Simulation Equipment Federal Use Only. Turns out the mulch delivery was a cover. Briar Glen Estates had been selected for a Department of Defense civilian interaction test, and Hank's landscaping contract was part of the simulation. But thanks to Bonnie, the entire neighborhood was now on semi-lockdown and about to become the most chaotic testing site in the region's history. And that was before Miss Dolores across the street peered through her blinds and screamed, "They're invading," while Duke relieved himself on her tulips. By noon, the HOA had called an emergency meeting under the gazebo. The military convoy now flanked the central fountain. Residents arrived in pajama pants and lawn chairs, coffee mugs in hand. A few teenagers hovered nearby, recording everything on their phones like it was the Super Bowl of neighborhood drama. Bonnie stood at the center like she was about to address the United Nations. Her bun was tight, her grip on the clipboard tighter. She smacked a fresh HOA manual onto the table. As president of Briar Glen, she announced with courtroom drama, "I hereby convene an emergency HOA session to address the unauthorized military occupation of our community." "Question," Hank interrupted, holding a popcorn bag. "Do I need a permit to sell snacks during the occupation?" Bonnie ignored him. "This community values structure, peace, and aesthetic excellence. We cannot tolerate rogue contractors operating under questionable circumstances." "I've been your mulch guy for 4 years," Hank said. "You bought fertilizer from me last spring." "That was before you painted a bald eagle on your truck hood," Bonnie shot back. Colonel Archer interjected. "This operation was authorized by the Department of Defense. Mr. Mercer's vehicle is part of a sanctioned federal training drill. Your bylaws are irrelevant." Bonnie blinked. "Then why wasn't the HOA informed?" "Because it was classified," Archer replied. "Until now. Thanks to you, it's a reportable incident." A hush fell over the crowd. Bonnie shuffled her papers with unnecessary drama. "Let's focus on the real issue. That truck violates vehicle height codes, and the dog has been off-leash in common areas." "You're really trying to take down a federal op with a leash law?" Hank asked, incredulous. Bonnie triumphantly held up another citation. Rule 9.2c, deliveries over 2 cubic yards require HOA pre-approval and a licensed landscaping escort. That was not done. Archer stood. "Ma'am, you are dangerously close to obstructing federal operations. This is your final warning. And do you understand the power of local governance?" Bonnie countered. That's when Sergeant Dorsey stepped forward with a recording device. "Sorry to interrupt," he said. "I'd like to submit Exhibit A." He pressed play. Bonnie's voice crackled out. "I don't care if he has Pentagon paperwork. I don't want that redneck and his circus truck ruining my neighborhood." Gasps erupted. Miss Dolores dropped her coffee. Hank choked on his popcorn. Even Duke tilted his head. Bonnie stammered, "That's taken out of context." "Actually," Archer said, "that was captured by one of the 38 ceramic gnomes your HOA purchased with community funds, each with built-in audio surveillance." "You." "What?" Phyllis, the HOA treasurer, asked. Bonnie turned crimson. "For safety. We spent over $2,000 on gnomes?" Phyllis asked, flipping through HOA records. "No vote, no approval?" Now the crowd was muttering, angry, amused, bewildered. "This is better than Netflix," a teen whispered. Bonnie tried one last desperate move. "I'll be contacting my lawyer." "Does your lawyer have jurisdiction over military mulch operations?" Hank asked. Dorsey tossed Duke a dog treat. "We've seen worse, but never with this much lawn decor." Colonel Archer turned to the board. "Resolve this before we file formal interference charges." And just like that, the military team dispersed. Bonnie stood there, clutching her clipboard like it was a flotation device in a sinking HOA ship. By nightfall, gnomes were stacked on her front lawn with signs that read, "These gnomes do not consent to surveillance." Hank, ever the instigator, passed out flyers for a mulch and mingle event at Lot 22. "Free snacks. Dog-friendly. Bring your grievances." Bonnie showed up mid-event, blasting classical music from a Bluetooth speaker to drown out Hank's playlist. Duke promptly peed on her speaker. The climax came during the infamous gnome trial, a final public HOA meeting on the clubhouse patio. Bonnie opened with a dramatic reading about protocol and misunderstanding. Then Hank took the stage. He presented receipts, GPS data, and a slideshow that included a $280 charge for emergency fuel reserves, 5 gas cans Bonnie kept for her golf cart. Then Phyllis pulled out the original HOA bylaws. HOA presidents can't spend over $500 in discretionary funds without a vote, she said. You spent over $3,000 on gnomes and a foot spa. The crowd erupted. Then Hank played the final audio clip. Bonnie's voice, "I don't care what the bylaws say. As long as I'm president, we do it my way." That was it. Phyllis motioned for a vote of no confidence. Bonnie received 2 votes, hers and one confused neighbor who thought they were voting on cookie flavors. She left that night like a dethroned dictator, muttering about lawsuits and new HOAs. The next morning, the gnomes were returned to her porch with a note. The people have spoken. Phyllis was elected interim president. Her first actions? Ban novelty badges, outlaw surveillance lawn decor, and host weekly coffee socials. Colonel Archer handed Hank a challenge coin engraved with exemplary civilian contribution. Hank displayed it proudly next to his photo of Duke in a life vest. The community transformed. Rules relaxed. Lawn flamingos returned. Peace, real peace, reigned. A week later, an envelope arrived in Hank's mailbox. No return address. Inside, a glossy brochure, Neighborhood Watch Excellence, Kansas Division, and a photo of Bonnie, smiling wide, holding a badge that looked suspiciously familiar. Beneath it, the words, "Keeping communities in check, one rule at a time." Hank laughed, tossed it into the fire pit, and said, "She's somebody else's mulch problem now." Duke barked once in agreement, and life in Briar Glen rolled on.